Madam Web, just as so many people predicted, was an unmitigated disaster. The critics despised it, the fans hated it, and of course, it was another box office flop. Just another failure in a string of them from Marvel, although this time it was from Sony Marvel as opposed to Disney. And I think a lot of people thought, just as we've seen so often over the last several years, if there's something that's female-focused or has a diverse cast or whatever, and it ends up flopping at the box office, they point the finger directly at the fans. They blame the fans and say, you know what? It must be your problem because you didn't show up to support this. But instead, it's been a little bit different with Madam Web. Dakota Johnson has been saying a lot of things about this movie, including that she's not surprised that it failed and that the studios are really to blame, that they think the audience is stupid, but audiences are actually much smarter than anyone gives them credit for. But there's somebody else who's been talking about the failure of this movie, and that is Sydney Sweeney, who over the past couple of months, I think has really blown up in terms of her popularity, or at least the amount of people who know who she is, for a variety of reasons. But she was also asked about the flop, the failure that is Madam Web. And this is, of course, in the aftermath of her going on Saturday Night Live and kind of roasting it, making fun of herself, making fun of the movie's failure in her opening monologue. Well, when she was asked a direct question about it, she continued to say the same things we've been hearing from this cast. They're not sitting there blaming toxic fans. They're not sitting there pointing the finger. They're simply saying, you know what? It flopped. That's what you have to deal with sometimes. Sydney Sweeney unfazed by Madam Web flop. I was just hired as an actress in it. I was along for the ride for whatever was going to happen. Sydney Sweeney just premiered her latest movie, Immaculate, at South by Southwest, and it marks her third high-profile release in 4 months. She conquered the box office opposite Glenn Powell in the hit romantic comedy Anyone But You. That's going to earn twice as much as Madam Web. An R-rated rom-com is going to earn twice as much as a big-budget superhero movie. Well, when you look at the budget for Madam Web, it's much less than the massive things that like Disney MCU has been putting out. But still, when you're talking about over $100 million budget, that is a massive budget. And she then experienced her first studio flop with the Sony comic book tentpole Madam Web. Not that Sweeney is too concerned. In an interview with the LA Times, the actor was unfazed when asked about Madam Web being widely mocked. I was just hired as an actress in it, so I was just along for the ride for whatever was going to happen. And it seems like that's such a simple thing to just kind of accept it and say, you know, sometimes those things happen. I wasn't a decision maker. I just got hired as an actress, but sometimes this happens and you gotta move on with it. I gotta be honest with you. I think that Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney taking part in a massive failure, an embarrassing flop that was Madam Web. I think both of them have come out of this thing looking way better than people ever thought they would after going to see the movie. Because both of them, instead of blaming the fans, which has been the standard, that has been the standard in the entertainment industry. It's why so many people are really pushed away from Hollywood right now. Because typically when something like this happens, when you have a cringe idea, it's terribly executed, flops at the box office, they point the finger at the fans and say, wow, they must be sexist, they must be racist, they must be this, they must be that, instead of admitting that the film was garbage. So you have Sydney Sweeney out there saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to make fun of it on SNL. I'm going to let people know I'm not bothered by it. I'm not going to blame anybody else for it. And you got Dakota Johnson out there defending the fans and talking shit to the studios. They both are coming out of this looking way better than I think people could have imagined. And I mean that both literally and figuratively. But it's good to see a different kind of response to a flop like this. This should be the standard. Actors and actresses, studios, directors, producers, they have to stop blaming the audience and blaming the customer and instead look inward when you have massive failures like this. And somehow, even after a massive flop, I think now people actually like Sydney Sweeney more than they ever did before. Let me know your thoughts about all this in the comments section below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.